Weimar Germany. The year is 1921. Germany just lost World War I. The victorious Allies handed them the Treaty of Versailles and a bill so enormous it was essentially designed to destroy the country. Germany owed reparations it could not pay. So the government did what desperate governments always do. It printed money. At first, it seemed to work. Bills got paid. Workers got wages. Life continued. Then, something broke. Prices started rising, then rising faster, then rising so fast that by 1923, the situation had become something the world had never seen before and has never fully seen since. A loaf of bread that cost 250 marks in January 1923 cost 200 billion marks by November of the same year. Let that sink in. 200 billion marks. For bread. Workers were paid twice a day because by lunchtime, the morning's wages were already worth less. Wheelbarrows full of cash could not buy basic groceries. People burned banknotes for heat because it was cheaper than firewood. A foreign visitor could buy an entire city block with a few American dollars. The savings that German families had built over generations, gone. Completely wiped out. Not lost in a crash, not stolen in a scandal. Simply made worthless by the government printing press running day and night. The middle class was destroyed overnight, and into the chaos and desperation that followed rose a political movement that would change the world forever. The hyperinflation of Weimar Germany did not just destroy a currency. It destroyed a society and created the conditions for one of the darkest chapters in human history. The lesson. When a government prints money to solve its problems, it is not solving anything. It is borrowing time and charging the interest to its own citizens. Zimbabwe. If Weimar Germany set the record for hyperinflation, Zimbabwe broke it so completely that economists had to invent new words to describe what happened. Zimbabwe in the 1980s was actually one of the most prosperous countries in Africa. It was called the breadbasket of the continent. Rich farmland, strong agriculture, a functioning economy. Then the government made a series of catastrophic decisions. Land was seized from productive farms and redistributed. Agricultural output collapsed. Food became scarce. The economy started shrinking. The government's solution: print money. By 2007, inflation in Zimbabwe hit 66,000% annually. That number alone is hard to process, so here is what it actually meant on the ground. Prices doubled every 24 hours. Workers spent their lunch breaks rushing to buy anything: food, soap, matches, before their morning wages became worthless by afternoon. Shops emptied within hours of restocking. Farmers stopped growing food because by the time they harvested it, the money they received was worth nothing. By November 2008, monthly inflation reached 79.6 billion%. The Reserve Bank of Zimbabwe issued a $100 trillion note. $100 trillion, a single bill. It could not buy a bus ticket. ATMs ran out of cash within minutes of being filled. Hospitals could not buy medicine. Teachers stopped showing up because their salaries were worthless. The entire formal economy essentially ceased to function. Zimbabwe eventually abandoned its own currency entirely and started using American dollars and South African rand just to survive. The country that was once the breadbasket of Africa was reduced to using other countries' money because its own had become completely worthless. Hungary 1946. Most people have never heard of this one, but it is technically the worst hyperinflation in recorded human history. Worse than Zimbabwe. Worse than Weimar Germany. Hungary after World War II was in ruins, the economy destroyed, infrastructure gone, and the government facing impossible debts. The printing presses started running. By July 1946, Hungary's daily inflation rate hit 207%. Prices doubled every 15 hours. The Hungarian government eventually issued a banknote with a face value of 100 quintillion pengo. That is 1 followed by 20 zeros. 100 quintillion. A single note. Completely worthless. Hungary solved its crisis by introducing an entirely new currency and essentially starting over from zero. The old money was swept up and literally used as compost. Every single person who had savings in Hungarian pengo lost everything. Overnight. Completely. With no recourse and no compensation. Venezuela. Venezuela's collapse is different from the others because it happened in living memory, and it happened to a country that should have been one of the wealthiest on earth. Venezuela sits on top of the largest proven oil reserves in the world, more oil than Saudi Arabia, more than anyone. In theory, it should be extraordinarily rich. In 2001, it was the wealthiest country in South America. By 2019, it had the fastest shrinking economy on the planet outside of active war zones. Here is what happened. The government nationalized industries, drove out foreign investment, implemented price controls that made it unprofitable to produce basic goods, became almost entirely dependent on oil revenue, and when oil prices crashed in 2014, the entire house of cards collapsed simultaneously. The response? Print money. By 2018, annual inflation hit 1 million%. The government redenominated the currency, removing 5 zeros from every bill and calling it a new currency. It kept collapsing. What this looked like on the ground was not a statistic. It was people. Doctors and engineers left the country by the millions. Those who stayed lost so much weight from food scarcity that researchers named a specific phenomenon after it. People lined up for hours for basic goods that might not even be available. Hospitals ran out of medicine. Surgeries were performed without anesthesia. Blackouts lasted days. A country with more oil than almost anywhere on Earth could not keep its lights on. Venezuela's collapse is still ongoing. The bolivar has been redenominated multiple times. Each time, the new currency eventually collapses into the same spiral. Argentina. Argentina's story is unique because it has not happened once. It has happened over and over and over again, and the country keeps making the same choices and getting the same results. Argentina has defaulted on its national debt 9 times. 9, more than almost any other country in modern history. The most dramatic collapse happened in 2001 and 2002. Argentina had pegged its currency to the US dollar. 1 peso equaled $1. This seemed stable. It was not. The government spent beyond its means. Debt piled up. When the peg finally broke, the peso lost 75% of its value almost overnight. People woke up one morning and their bank accounts were frozen. The government limited how much of their own money citizens could withdraw. When restrictions were finally lifted, the money they got back was worth a fraction of what they had deposited. Businesses closed overnight. Unemployment hit 25%. The middle class was wiped out. People banged pots and pans in the streets in a form of protest that became so famous it has its own name. What makes Argentina uniquely fascinating and uniquely tragic is what happened to the culture. Argentinians stopped trusting banks entirely. Wealthy Argentinians keep their savings in American dollars hidden in their homes. The country has one of the highest rates of physical dollar cash hoarding in the world. Entire generations have been raised to believe that their own government's money is fundamentally untrustworthy, and they have been proven right repeatedly. Argentina is currently experiencing another inflationary crisis as of right now in 2026. Annual inflation recently exceeded 200%. The peso continues losing value, and the cycle continues. Yugoslavia. The collapse of Yugoslavia in the early 1990s produced one of history's most dramatic currency destructions alongside one of its most devastating wars. As the country fractured politically, the Serbian government controlling the central bank printed money to fund military operations and government spending simultaneously. Monthly inflation peaked at 313 million% in January 1994. The government issued a 500 billion dinar note, then a 10 billion dinar note, then removed zeros, then issued new currency, then watched it collapse again. Workers received wages measured in billions and trillions that could not buy a single meal by the time they walked out of the building. The Yugoslav dinar effectively ceased to exist as a meaningful store of value. People abandoned it entirely and conducted transactions in German marks or through direct bartering. A currency that had existed for decades was rendered completely meaningless in less than 2 years. Every single collapse you just watched followed the exact same pattern. Government faces a crisis, prints money, ordinary people lose everything. The powerful walk away, fine. It has happened in Germany, Hungary, Zimbabwe, Venezuela, Argentina, Yugoslavia. And it is happening somewhere in the world right now. The printing press has destroyed more middle-class wealth than any war or recession in history. None of these governments planned to destroy their currency. They all thought they could control it. They were all wrong. That is what Capital Code is here to expose. The hidden systems of money and power that affect your life, whether you understand them or not. If this opened your eyes, subscribe. We have a new breakdown every week. And if you want to understand why Bitcoin was invented as a direct response to everything you just watched, that video is right here. See you in the next one.